Hey, well, I am so grateful that we are together on this beautiful June week for another conversation from the book of Proverbs on the way of the wise. Now, Chris and I, we have three children, Sarah, Andrew, and Alex. And when the kids were little in our home, we were in the habit of reading to them. And one of the volumes that I would read from still hangs out at our house, and it's this one right here, the Aesop for Children. Now, Aesop's fables, as many of you know, they go back like 2,000 years to the days of classical Greece, and they're these fables, many of them about animals, which give us an image, a picture into the habits that we have in life. And so one of Aesop's fables in this book is one that's pretty famous. It's just called The Tortoise and the Hare. And many of you know the story of the tortoise and the hare. There is a race, you know, the rabbit and the turtle, the tortoise and the hare line up on the starting line. It's like on your mark, get set, go. The rabbit, the hare, takes off, gets way in the lead, and the tortoise just kind of plods along. But then the rabbit stops to take a nap, and the tortoise just slow and steady gradually keeps moving, passes the hare, and crosses the finish line first. This is a fable, Greek, from classical Greek era, over 2,000 years old, the fable of the tortoise and the hare. And many of you are familiar with the moral of the story is this, and it's just slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. And I don't think it's the slow part that counts so much, because anybody can just kind of slowly mosey along. It's that steady part. Slow and steady wins the race. Remember that. Remember that. The tortoise wins. Now, in our study of Proverbs, the tortoise, the turtle, does not make an appearance in the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament of our Bible, but there is this other creature that has the same quality and attribute. It's not particularly fast, it's not enormous and particularly strong, but it's just consistent. And it's known for its persistence and its diligence and its consistency. And that critter in Proverbs is not the tortoise, it's not a turtle, it's an ant. And so you find this in Proverbs chapter 30, down around verse 25, where we read these words. It says, "Ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up food in the summer." Ants are creatures of little strength. It's like we're not talking here about the bulk of a rhinoceros or the strength of an ox or the size of a moose. We're just this little ant, creatures of little strength, yet they store up food in summer. And the way the ant does this is just taking repeated trips back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, carrying seeds to the anthill. It's consistent, it's persistent, it's repetitive, and it's life-giving. And it gives us the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite all-time topics, which is this. It's ant power. And ant power isn't just about what we do, it's about what we choose to do again and again and again and again. Ant power is about repetition. It's about choosing a God-honoring direction in our life and returning to a habit or behavior again and again and again. So right at the outset of our conversation about ant power, I just need us to recognize that if you desire to grow in your faith, what it means to know Christ and to follow Christ, I can think of no better path to do that than the path of ant power, consistent habits that we set up in our life. If you desire to get healthier financially or physically, I recommend ant power. If you desire to grow healthier in your friendships, or build a healthier marriage or a healthier family, I recommend the discipline and the habits of ant power. If you desire to change your world, if you look at our city or your church or your family and you go, I just want to make a difference. My friends, we have got to talk about ant power, not just what we do, but what we choose to do again and again and again. We're talking about our habits. And so I'm gonna ask something of you today. Just think in terms of one habit. And if you walk away from this conversation today and you go, okay, there's one habit in my life that I need to continue, or one habit to revive, or one habit to begin. And if you commit yourself to that today, I think our time will be very well spent. One habit to continue. If you walk away from today and going, I've been doing that month after month, year after year, and you know what? I'm gonna continue to do that. Or revive, where you go, I used to do that and I lost it along the way. I need to begin that again. And the third one is, I know, I've needed to start that habit, and today is the day it begins. So I'm gonna be reminding you through the course of our conversation just what habit could you latch onto? A habit to continue, a habit to revive, or a habit to begin. And our conversation today, what I wanna do is just take this ant power thing, and I wanna hit it kind of from three different angles. And so the first angle, and I've already led on to this, the first angle is just your habits. The first angle is just your habits. And so let's do this. Let's cycle back to that verse that we looked at from Proverbs chapter 30, the one about the ant. And let's look at it again, kind of in two parts. And along the bottom here, we've got our ant motif, just to keep this in our minds. It says, ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up food in the summer. Ants are creatures of little strength, not an ox, not a rhinoceros, not a moose, but they store up food in the summer. And the way they store up food in the summer is by taking trip after carrying one seed at a time back to the ant nest or back to the ant hill. And my friends, this verse is not about ants. This verse is about people. This verse is about families. Imagine a father, 3,000 years ago in the time of wise King Solomon, taking his two little children, little boy, little girl, let's say a 5-year-old and 7-year-old, out to an anthill that he finds. And they kneel down by the anthill. And he says, I just want you to watch. And the kids watch these ants carrying single seeds into the anthill. And then the dad quotes the proverb to his kids. Many of the proverbs were teaching tools to children, to your kids, as they develop. As they're watching the ants go back and forth and back and forth, the dad quotes the proverb, ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up their food in the summer. And if the dad does this repetitively, there's a possibility that the day will come when he will quote the first half of the proverb, and his little son and daughter, they will quote the second half of the proverb. The dad will say, ants are creatures of little strength, and the boy and the girl blurt out, yet they store up their food in summer. And again, this is not about ants. As they hover over this anthill, the father goes, we will be like the ants. We will be like the ant. We will check the condition of our goats every day to see if any are sick and injured. We will be like the ants, repetitive, one seed at a time, back and forth, again and again, over and over. We will get in the habit of checking on our goats. We will get in the habit once a week of walking through our vineyard and pulling weeds. We will get in the habit of plowing on time, planting on time, and harvesting on time. And the day comes when they're out weeding in the vineyard and the kids are going, we are so sick of this. And the father says, ants are creatures of little strength. And the kids go, I know, yet they store up food in the summer. It's about repetitive activity. It's about our habits. Over the years, I've talked a little bit about some of the habits that I've adopted in my life for the care of my soul, or for financial health, or for relational health. Almost every day I sit down and I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And the lousier and stinkier my attitude is, the more important it is. for me to just reach out and say, gracious God, thank you for this, thank you for this, thank you for this. Does that change my day? It might, but see, it's not what happens in a day. It's doing that for weeks, it's doing that for months, it's doing that for years. That begins to train the channels of the heart, bending the spirit in the direction of being grateful, being a grateful person. It's one of the habits that I adopted for the care of my soul. I have relational habits. I've mentioned before that there's a group, myself, 3 other pastors, twice a year. We borrow someone's cottage out on the lakeshore and we go there to study. And we have done this for 26 years, again and again and again. It's a relational habit. And over time, some of these guys have become my closest friends in life. It's a relational habit. Chris and I have financial habits that we've had year after year after year after year. You get a paycheck or pay stub like every couple weeks. So it's like 26 pay periods a year. Like clockwork. When that payday comes for me, I take a segment of that check and I move it into a savings account. Now, if you looked at the amount, it would not be an astronomical amount. But we have done this 26 times a year with each pay period for years. And while the amount is not staggering of the individual deposit, over times it just grows, which is exactly what Proverbs said would happen. Here we go. Proverbs chapter 13. Proverbs chapter 13 and down around verse 11, it says, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever, check this out, whoever gathers money, and those terms are little by little, makes it grow. Dishonest money dwindles away. What it's advising against here is a get-rich-quick scheme, you know. I'm going to just do this all of a sudden and might be a little shady. It's like, no, just set some aside over and over and over. The word ant power isn't used in Proverbs 13, but it's just this discipline. And in addition to savings, we've talked before about how we did the same thing with giving. Just every month right now, it used to be a checks in an offering plate. Now it is direct deposit into a giving fund every single month. Again, if you looked at the individual amounts, they would not be staggering, not the individual amounts, but over time, it just grows. My friends, we're talking ant power here. Spiritual with a gratitude practice, relational, same guys, 26 years, financial, month after month after month. Physically, let me break the news to you. I'm not signing up for the CrossFit Games anytime soon. But each week, a handful of times, walk with Chris or bike or jog, year after year after year, manage to stay in decent physical condition. Again, none of these events are noteworthy. You know, pastor runs 2 miles before meetings, alert the media. It's just the over and over and over and over and over again. So as I've been talking about these spiritual disciplines, relational disciplines, financial disciplines, kind of like health disciplines, let me go back to that one habit question. Is it possible that right now you're thinking of one habit to continue, one habit to revive? Oh my goodness, we used to do that. We need to start doing that again. Or one habit to begin. For this conversation really to bear fruit in your life, I think you need to isolate one habit. Maybe one to continue, one to revive, and then one to begin. What habit to continue, revive, and begin? Back to the verse. It's just ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up food in the summer, one trip after another after another. And so you're going, Jeff, you are getting an awful lot out of that single verse about ant power and habit formation. You see, but that's what we're supposed to do. With a proverb, you're supposed to lean into it. You're supposed to think about it. You're supposed to dwell on the imagery. You're supposed to focus on what it means. So the second angle of our conversation about habits, we start out just talking about your habits. Now let's just talk about your focus. Can we do that? Let's just talk about your focus. Now, there is another place in Proverbs where the ant makes an appearance, and it's Proverbs starts with 9 chapters of these conversations or these speeches on the importance of wisdom. And in chapter 6, verse 6, this is where the ant would make another appearance. It says this, go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Specifically, this was written to the person who was lacking in motivation. The whole section, like verses 6 through 8, it's go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. The sluggard in Proverbs is like this person that has this magnetic gravitational pull toward the couch, toward the hammock. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. And then verse 7 will go on to say, the ants have no leader. It's like no one's cracking the whip, and yet they store up food in the summer. Very, very similar to that ant proverb in chapter 30. But I want you to notice the middle line here. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. That consider its ways has to do with focus. Think about it. That's what this is saying here. Look at an anthill and really, really think about it. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Some of you, next semester, you're gonna need that proverb. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise, because you're gonna get 2 months into the semester and you're gonna be facing a mountain of reading, and you're gonna go, I'm never gonna get through all this, and I'm so sick of it. There's just a ton of reading I have to do. And just here, listen, just keep chipping away. Just keep faithfully chipping away. Just those 10 words, go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Just keep chipping away. It's not just for students. I think of those of you who are parents. And you're just tired of parenting. And there can come a point where you go, I think I'm done. I think I've given this child everything I need to give them. I've given them all I've got at this point. I think I'm done. And you go, yeah, but unfortunately, she's only 4. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. It's moms and dads. It's just this encouragement to keep showing up and to keep showing up and to keep showing up, to ask your gracious God for grace and patience and love to bring yourself again and again and again. It's not flashy, but it's good. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Some of you in your early to mid-20s, you will discover that your company, the place you're working for, has kind of a matching retirement program, meaning if you put in some money each month, they will contribute some money each month. And you go, I'm 26. I got forever to think about these things. A little secret. You're 26 and you turn your head and look away and you look back and suddenly you're 56. I think the earlier you latch on to ant power, the more years you will have in your life to implement ant power. But just those 10 powerful words, go to the ant, consider its ways, think about it. Think long about it. Think hard about it. Focus on it. This is about your focus. Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise. Now, before we move to the third angle, there's just a word that I want to share with you, particularly about those of you who are plagued by perfectionism. And the deal is that perfectionism can be paralyzing. And you kind of go, I want to establish a new habit, but I got to make sure it's the right habit. I got to make sure it's the perfect habit. I got to make sure it's the best habit. And what I want to share with you is just this simple sentence. I read it somewhere years ago. I forget where, or I would give you the source, but it went something like this. It went something like, getting a habit in place is more important than getting the perfect habit in place. Getting a habit in place is more important than getting the perfect habit in place. And what I love about that is it's really saying this. It's easier to change a habit than it is to establish a habit. So those of you plagued by perfectionism, don't wait for the perfect Bible reading program. Just get one started. Listen, if you establish a time of day, whether that's 7 in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, you can change it to a different program later. But changing a habit is easier than establishing a habit. Getting a habit in place is more important than getting the perfect habit in place. You know, I've thought about some kind of savings program, but should that be a money market program? Where should I invest that? How much? And I can't decide exactly. My friends, just begin. You can morph it later. You can change it later. I decided to run 3 times a week, but it's messing with my knees. Change it. Start walking, water ballet, whatever. But at least you have the time set aside for the care of the body that God has given you. Getting a habit in place is more important than getting the perfect habit in place. May you be freed from the paralysis of perfection. Just start the habit and morph it and change it as you go along. Changing a habit is easier than getting one established in your life. And I know that as we've talked about some of these things today, a savings plan, relationships, I've hung out with these same dudes for, 26 years, or, walking or running. Some of you go, Jeff, you so don't get it. I want to do something great with my life. I want my life to count. I mean, maybe I'm not going to change the world, but at least I want to change the world around me. All right, what I would like to share with you is that, and by the way, me too. I want my one and only life to be used in a powerful, powerful way in the lives of others. And what I want to suggest is that the biggest imprint that you can make in the lives of others, in your city, in your church, and in your family, is by showing up again and again and again. If you want to leave a great imprint in life, we're still back to ant power. Angle number 3 of our conversation. Let's just talk about your imprint. And when I talk about your imprint, when I talk about your impact and influence on others, the imprint that you make with your life. Now, a couple weeks ago, I had a conversation called A Conversation About Our City. And I talked about 3 commitments that I have made and 3 commitments that I invite you into. And in relationship, particularly to the tumultuous racial storm that we find ourselves in, the 3 commitments I mentioned were just look back, lean in, and love well. Look back, it's just recognize some of this stuff happened. And we have a country with a racial history that involves segregation. And so just be able to say, hey, be willing to look back. Be willing to lean in. The lean in part was just, help me see what you see. Lean in, help me see what you see. And the love well is just the greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Second commandment of importance is love your neighbor as yourself. So look back, lean in, love well. By the way, if you didn't catch that message a couple weeks ago, I would plead with you to watch that. I think it's important for the health of our church, for the health of our heart, and for the health of our city. Now, as you might imagine, that sermon that delved into racial issues, it generated a little bit of email that came my way. But there was one email that I wanted to share a portion of it with you. Email came from a Ada Bible Church attender, longtime attender by the name of Steve. Steve is Asian, And vocationally, he works with different companies, works with different organizations in the areas that we would call diversity and inclusion. And so it's some pretty major companies that he's been able to step in and serve. We're talking Walmart, Toyota, Caterpillar, NASA, among others, where we've been able to step in and give them counsel in this issue. So Steve and Ada Attender, following that message about look back, lean in, love well, he sent me an email. I just want to read to you just a fragment of it. He said, many people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds are pained as they are confronted by our current racial storm. Many are stepping in to learn, standing up to protest, and speaking out in order to show solidarity. And then Steve says, I am hopeful because of this. This makes me really hopeful. But a large portion of those may have the privilege of entering the storm when they choose and walking away from the storm when it no longer gets media attention. Hear that. Racial issues, ton of media attention right now. There's a possibility for you, for us, to enter the storm when we want to and exit the storm. It just becomes a conversation that we were about for a limited period of time. Now listen, what I want to suggest to you here is that part of the beauty of a peaceful demonstration or protest is that you get to show up at 3 and go home at 5. But without using the words, something Steve is describing there is what I would call a lifestyle of looking back, a lifestyle of leaning in, and a lifestyle of loving well. Looking back, leaning in, loving well, not just for a season, but for a considerable period of time. So 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, I mentioned a story, and I want to cycle back to it to just highlight one particular feature of that story. I talked about a day at Cascade Roadhouse, probably 5 years ago, a little restaurant where a guy by the name of Mark said, listen, there are some very influential African-American leaders in Grand Rapids. I need to introduce you to them. You need to know them because we need you part of this conversation. And that began a series of dinners. Now these dinners, not just like, lunch for half an hour and a sandwich. We're talking at someone's home, 3 hours to 4 hours in length, at a clip of every 3 or 4 months. So for the last 4.5 years of my life, I've been committed to these dinners in which trust is built and relationships are grown. Over the last month of racial turmoil, any encouragement that I have been able to give those guys has been built on the platform of 4.5 years of meals. By contrast, if I had waited for this racial storm to blow in, which you don't know is coming, and then you step in, hello, I'm Jeff. We've never met, but I'm here to help. How can I encourage you? By going away? I'm telling you, any encouragement that's substantial that I've been able to give during this time is built on the platform of those 4.5, my friends, again, we're talking about ant power here. The ability to go back again and again and again because trust and relationship is built over time. If you genuinely desire to make an imprint on your world, it will require a lifestyle of bringing yourself to people again and again and again. And so I want to go back to the question I asked at the top. What is that one habit? One habit to continue, one habit to revive, one habit to begin. Can you isolate something? Can you focus on one good habit? And man, it's boring and it's old and it's not that interesting, but you go, we're not gonna stop it because baby, that's ant power. It's not that interesting, but it's life-giving when measured over time. We're gonna continue that. Over the course of our conversation, some of you have been looking back and you've been going, oh, dude, we had that years ago and it was life-giving and we dropped it along the way. I need to revive that habit. And some others, as we've been talking, the Spirit of God has just been moving in you and you've just been able to say, this is the day. Today is the day. Today is the day. Today is the day to begin a life-giving and life-changing and life-altering habit. What habit would you continue? What habit would you revive? What habit would you begin? And as we close, I just want you to remember something. I want you to remember that the tortoise wins. Slow and steady, over and over. It's not just about what we do, it's what we do on repeat that can make the biggest difference in our lives. And it's not just the tortoise that wins. From our study in Proverbs, the word of the wise, it's the ant that wins. It's the dad hovering over the anthill, the ant nest with his kids and saying, ants are creatures of little power, but watch them back and forth and back and forth. They know how to store up food in the summer. Listen, whatever habit you are latching onto in this season, whatever God-honoring directional habit our Father is drawing you to, may He give you strength. May He give you perseverance. May He give you stamina to honor Him by returning to good things again and again and again. It's the power. It's ant power. Thanks so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you next week.